Have you ever, like, rehearsed a tragedy in your mind just because your family was a few minutes late coming home?
Oh, absolutely. It's the worst.
You know the exact feeling, right? The clock ticks past the time they said they'd be back, and suddenly your mind isn't just wondering where they are.
It is racing to the absolute worst case scenarios.
Exactly. Did he get into a car accident? Did something terrible happen out of nowhere? In reality, everything is completely fine. They probably just hit traffic.
But in your head, you have already lived through the disaster.
Yeah, and it's exhausting.
It is incredibly common, and yet, it feels so uniquely isolating when it happens to you. Or think about this scenario. Have you ever stared at your keys, locked your front door, and yet felt that relentless, tight knot in your chest, forcing you to turn back and pull the handle one more time?
And then maybe, just one more time after that.
Right, exactly.
Because you know the phone is in your pocket. You know the door is locked. But there is this invisible weight, this demand from your own brain that says that one extra check is the only thing keeping some vague, impending doom from becoming a reality.
It's a really heavy burden to carry around every day.
It really is. So today on the Deep Dive, we are unpacking the science behind this exhausting mental burden of obsessive thinking. We're looking at why your brain creates these false alarms and, well, the deeply counterintuitive method you can use to finally break the cycle.
The natural instinct when your brain tortures you like this is to assume that something is, fundamentally wrong with your character, or that the world is inherently as dangerous as your thoughts suggest.
You think you're just broken.
Exactly. But to understand why our brain goes rogue when everything is actually fine, we really have to look at the biological anatomy of what is happening inside your head.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of it, because that's the part that drives people crazy. Why is my brain playing these high-definition horror movies for me when I'm just trying to enjoy a Tuesday evening on the couch?
Well, in clinical psychology, these are called intrusive thoughts. And the critical distinction here is the word intrusive.
Meaning you aren't actively inviting them in.
Right. Normally, when you think, you are the author. You consciously decide to plan a grocery list or solve a work problem using your prefrontal cortex. That's the logical reasoning center of your brain.
The part doing the actual heavy lifting.
Exactly. But intrusive thoughts bypass that system entirely. They originate deeper in the brain, primarily involving the amygdala, which is your brain's threat detection center.
And the amygdala isn't exactly known for being irrational, right?
Not at all. The amygdala doesn't do logic. It does survival. And when it senses a potential threat, even an imaginary one, it floods your system with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline before your prefrontal cortex can even evaluate the situation.
Okay, let's unpack this. Is it essentially like having a highly sensitive smoke detector in your house that goes off at like 120 decibels just because you're boiling water for pasta?
Oh, that's a perfect way to put it. What's fascinating here is...
Like the alarm is doing its job of detecting something, but it has completely lost the ability to distinguish between making dinner and the entire house burning down to the foundation.
Yes. The smoke detector analogy is a great starting point, but we have to look at how that actually plays out biologically. Because when your kitchen smoke detector goes off, you can visually confirm there's no fire and just turn it off.
Right, you just wave a towel at it and you're good.
Yeah, but in your brain, when the amygdala sounds the alarm, it actively suppresses the prefrontal cortex.
Wait, really? It shuts it down.
It literally redirects blood flow away from your logical brain to prepare your body to fight or flee. So your brain isn't broken, it is just experiencing an evolutionary mismatch.
So it's a smoke detector calibrated for the wilderness, wildly misinterpreting the low-stakes environment of modern life.
Exactly. Because your logical brain is momentarily offline, you can't just think your way out of the feeling of danger.
Which creates an illusion of safety through action. Like, if I just pull the door handle 3 times, my family won't get in a car crash.
Right, because the amygdala is demanding proof.
Logically, sitting here right now, I know those two things have nothing to do with each other. But in the moment, when the logical brain is powered down, the alarm is blaring, the brain connects them. It feels like a survival imperative.
It demands compliance. The brain makes you feel that if you don't do exactly what the thought dictates, the catastrophic scenario will happen.
So you just comply. You check the lock.
You reread the email for the 10th time, and the moment you do, the amygdala registers that you took action and the alarm stops.
And you feel that tiny, fleeting hit of relief.
Yes, but from a neurological standpoint, you've just made the problem worse.
Because you rewarded the false alarm.
Precisely. You've taught your brain that the false alarm was a real alarm and that the only reason you survived was because you did the ritual.
Okay, wait, I'm stuck on something you just said about the email and perfectionism. Because here's where it gets really interesting to me.
Sure, what is it?
If I'm checking that email 10 times because I care deeply about my job, or if I'm terrified of my family getting hurt because I love them, doesn't that just mean I'm a deeply caring, responsible person?
That raises a really important question.
Because I feel like if these thoughts come from a place of care, why do they mutate into something so destructive? Why is that a problem?
That is the tragic irony of obsessive thinking. You are right that these reactions originated from a noble place. I mean, you worry because you love.
Right.
You check because you care about your work. But the line is crossed when the behavior stops serving the outcome and starts serving the anxiety.
Ah, I see.
Let's look at the psychology of perfectionism as an example. For someone caught in this loop, catching a minor typo in an email isn't about achieving excellence. It's about avoiding catastrophe.
Oh, I know people who will literally lose sleep over a minor phrasing choice they sent in a Slack message to a colleague. Not even a major error, just a tiny imperfection.
Yes, but it's a specific brand of perfectionism. To the obsessive mind, that tiny flaw doesn't feel like a minor error. It feels like absolute evidence that they are an imposter, that they will be fired, rejected, or that their entire life will unravel.
Yeah.
The amygdala magnifies the consequence to life or death proportions. The mechanism of protection, that original desire to do a good job, is essentially taken hostage by the brain's threat assessment software.
Because you are desperately trying to control the unknown. But you can't control the unknown. By definition, it is unknown.
Which brings us to the paradox of thought suppression. When people realize these thoughts are ruining their peace, their first instinct is to try and block them out.
Like telling yourself, don't think about the car crash. Stop worrying about the typo.
Exactly. But from a psychological standpoint, thought suppression is famously disastrous. It all goes back to Daniel Wegner's famous ironic process theory. It's often known as the white bear experiment.
Oh, is that the one where you tell someone not to think of a white bear and suddenly their brain is entirely populated by polar bears?
That is exactly the phenomenon, but Wegner explained why it happens.
Okay, why?
When you tell your brain to suppress a thought, it creates two processes. First, an operating process that consciously tries to find something else to think about.
Makes sense, like looking for a distraction.
Right. But second, it creates a subconscious monitoring process that constantly scans your mind to make sure you aren't thinking about the white bear.
Oh, wow. Wait, really?
Yes.
So the brain is assigning a background task to actively look for the exact thing you're trying to hide from.
That is the mechanism. The monitor has to keep the concept of the white bear or the car crash or the unlocked door active in your memory in order to check for it.
That is wild.
So the harder you try to control your mind and suppress the fear, the more you guarantee that the thought stays front and center.
Like a trap.
It really is. The suffering isn't because you are weak. The suffering is because you are trying way too hard to fix a mechanical glitch in your brain through sheer cognitive force. And the system just isn't built for that.
So we are stuck in this terrifying loop. The brain is screaming about danger because it wants to protect us. Logic is locked out of the building.
Exactly.
And if we try to force the thoughts away, we just deploy a subconscious monitor that keeps the fear alive. It sounds like an entirely unwinnable game.
It is unwinnable if you play by the rules your anxiety has set, which is why the only way out is to refuse to play that particular game.
How do we do that?
Well, since fighting and suppressing the thoughts only strengthens the neural pathways, the actual psychological treatment is incredibly counterintuitive. It involves radical acceptance and what clinicians call exposure and response prevention, or ERP.
Okay, I am leaning in here, but you have to walk me through this carefully.
Of course.
Because telling someone drowning in an obsessive panic attack to practice radical acceptance sounds a bit like telling someone in a sinking boat to just accept the water. What does step one actually look like in the real world?
That's a fair critique, which is why we need to define acceptance operationally, not just philosophically. To stop giving obsessive thoughts power, you must stop going to war with them.
Meaning what, exactly?
You don't need to suppress the idea that the house might burn down. It keeps coming back, because your panicked reaction tells your amygdala the thought is a valid threat. Acceptance means allowing the thought to exist without engaging with its content.
Without engaging.
Right.
Yeah.
We often use the concept of a passing cloud. You observe the thought. You say, okay, my brain is currently generating a thought about the stove being on. You don't fight it, but you also don't obey it.
So it's kind of like ignoring a troll on the internet.
How do you mean?
Think about it. If you engage with an internet troll, and start arguing with them in the comments logically, they keep bothering you. They feed on that engagement.
That is very true.
But if you see the comment, acknowledge that the troll is there, and just keep scrolling. They eventually get bored and lose their power, right?
The internet troll analogy is spot on, but here's the twist. Your brain isn't just the comment section, it's the algorithm.
Oh, I like that.
By engaging with the troll, by doing the ritual, checking the door, or endlessly ruminating on the worry, you are telling the algorithm that this content is highly relevant.
You're boosting its engagement.
Exactly. You are essentially telling your brain's algorithm to push that fearful content to the top of your mental feed tomorrow. Radical acceptance is reading the comment, shrugging, and scrolling past so the algorithm learns to deprioritize it.
But doing that in practice is agonizing. When that anxiety hits, your physical body is screaming at you to do the ritual. The physical urge to pull the door handle is overwhelming because, like you said earlier, the amygdala is pumping you full of adrenaline. How do you just scroll past adrenaline?
Which brings us to the critical response prevention part of ERP, because just sitting there trying to accept the cloud while your heart is pounding can leave you paralyzed.
Yeah, that doesn't sound sustainable.
Step 2 is action over rumination. If we connect this to the bigger picture, you have to change your physical behavior to change your brain's wiring.
Okay, explain the wiring part. How does changing my physical behavior actually rewire a brain that is currently trapped in a false alarm?
It comes down to neuroplasticity. Specifically a concept known as Hebb's law, which states neurons that fire together wire together.
Fire together, wire together.
Right. In an obsessive cycle, the feeling of anxiety and the action of checking the door have fired together so many times that they are deeply wired into a superhighway in your brain.
So they're physically linked.
Exactly. To dismantle that superhighway, you have to starve it. You have to experience the anxiety, let the alarm ring, but explicitly withhold the behavioral response.
Meaning, I have to let the neurons fire the anxiety signal, but physically stop the checking action from firing alongside it.
Precisely. Let's look at the door checking example in slow motion. You are standing at your front door. You've locked it once. The urge hits you like a physical weight to turn back and pull the handle again.
The amygdala is demanding proof.
Yes. In that exact second, the action over rumination is to say to yourself, I feel the urge to check the lock, but I am choosing to walk away. And then you physically turn your body and walk to your car.
And what happens in your body when you do that? Because I imagine the alarm doesn't just quietly turn off.
Oh, no, the alarm will ring louder. You will feel a massive spike in anxiety as you walk to your car. Your brain will scream that you are making a fatal mistake.
That sounds awful.
It is hard, but here's the biological magic. By walking away and not checking the door, you are starving that specific neural pathway. If you do this consistently, the brain eventually learns that the alarm was false because you walked away and the world didn't end.
So the connection weakens over time.
Exactly. The overgrown jungle path of that anxiety loop starts to fade.
You know, I feel the urge to check, but I'm choosing to walk away. Using the word choosing feels incredibly vital there, because for so long, the intrusive thoughts have been making all the choices for you.
They really have.
They dictated your schedule, your peace of mind, your actions. Taking back the choice, even while your heart is pounding out of your chest, is fundamentally reclaiming your agency over your own hardware.
It is the ultimate act of agency. And this applies equally to the internal, purely mental rituals.
What do you mean?
Well, when your mind starts spiraling into those worst-case scenarios about your family being late, the ritual is often mental rumination. You sit on the couch trying to logically calculate the odds of a car crash to soothe yourself.
Right, pulling up traffic maps, calculating travel times, basically playing detective in your own living room.
Exactly. But you cannot outthink an intrusive thought because the thought isn't rooted in logic. It's rooted in a misfiring amygdala.
So logic is useless there.
Pretty much. So the response prevention there is to acknowledge the cloud. You say, my brain is offering me a story about car crash. And then you physically get up.
Just get up and do something else.
Go wash the dishes, read a book, or call a friend. You pull your attention back to the present physical reality. You act as if the alarm is false, and eventually the brain catches up to your actions.
So what does this all mean for you? Recognizing this isn't a character flaw, but a mechanical glitch in your brain's threat assessment software is the first real step to taking your agency back.
Absolutely.
If you are listening to this right now and nodding along, if you know the exhaustion of that relentless internal alarm, I want to synthesize the journey we've just taken. Because there is profound relief in understanding the biology of your own suffering. This constant need to worry, this compulsion to check and recheck, is not a failure of your personality.
It was a survival instinct gone awry. It was your brain's misguided way of trying to control the chaos of the world when you felt helpless. It deployed the only tools it had, hyper-vigilance and adrenaline, to try and keep you safe.
But those old tools have become chains. They are holding you back from moving forward with any kind of ease. The good news is, dismantling a neural pathway doesn't require you to let go of everything all at once. You don't have to suddenly be perfectly zen by tomorrow morning.
Healing is deeply incremental. You start by simply loosening your grip, bit by bit, delay checking the lock for 5 minutes, leave one minor doubt in an email unanswered.
Just let the white bear hang out for a minute.
Exactly. Practice sitting with the discomfort of the white bear for just a moment without trying to chase it away. Every single time you choose to walk away and focus on present action, you are actively rewiring that smoke detector.
You are building new, healthier neural pathways. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over on your own.
Yeah, let's hear it.
We've spent this time breaking down how these exhausting thoughts are simply our brain's overenthusiastic, highly flawed way of showing it cares about our survival. It is a protection mechanism born out of a desire to keep you and the people you love safe, even if its execution is currently driving you crazy.
Which it often does.
Very much so. So what would happen if, the next time that false alarm rings, the next time you feel that overwhelming urge to pull the door handle a third time, what if you didn't fight it with anger? What if you simply whispered, "Thank you for trying to protect me," and then turned around and walked out to your car anyway? Could a tiny bit of gratitude for your brain's flawed biology be the ultimate circuit breaker for your deepest anxieties?